What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? In primary school we had a World War I memorial lesson and we were asked if anyone had any relatives who fought at the time. My friend brought in a picture of his great-great-grandfather with his wife. A girl also brought in a picture of her great-great-grandfather with his wife. The teacher said they looked similar. She put them side by side and looked shocked. We gathered around and it was the same man who had kept his two wives a secret. Both had been married privately. They were cousins and didn't know. My sister's boyfriend decided that he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave his 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He had bad phone service, so they mostly kept in touch through emails. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a co-worker and a week of sleuthing later and it turns out he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. Told this before in another thread, but it's still hilarious to me. Guy I knew in high school English class was talking one winter day about how he was late to school because someone hit his mailbox. His folks made him fix it up before he went to school. He missed his ride and had to walk instead. But the school staff was cool about it and didn't punish him. A few minutes later, another girl comes into class and she's talking about how her morning sucked. She lost control going down a hill and hit someone's mailbox. She freaked out and drove off before anyone witnessed it and described a few details of the house. Mailbox guy puts 2 and 2 together and blurts out, "You hit my mailbox." He wasn't super mad about it and she turned beet red. It was hilarious at the time the way they both reacted. We are living in Florida at the time and my dad goes to the eye doctor because he is seeing double. In all other respects he's healthy. He explains his symptoms to the doctor. This was the early 2000s. The doctor picks up a medical book on eye problems. He finds the kind symptoms my dad is describing. The doctor shows him the book. In the book there is a whole medical page explaining what he is experiencing and a picture of a kid from the 1960s. My dad looks at the picture and says, "Doc, that's me." The doctor says, "Yes. Those are the symptoms you are showing." My dad says, "No, really, that's me in the picture." It turns out my dad had this eye problem when he was a kid and it was so rare that they took his picture in 1960s Ohio SND slapped him in a book of rare eye problems. He doesn't remember much about taking the picture, but he did manage to get a copy of it to take home. Little town I grew up in had these 2 car dealerships on opposite sides of town. One Chevy, one Ford. They were bitter rivals. Attack ads. Shitty talking salesmen. Billboard wars. You name it. When the owner of the Chevy dealership died, it came out he'd also owned the Ford dealership by way of a shell company. No one saw that coming, including a lot of the higher ups who worked at the dealerships. That sounds like the ultimate bored rich guy. Buy 2 car dealerships. My esthetician was giving a Brazilian wax to a new client. New client goes on and on about this new guy she is dating. And how he's a bartender at his esthetician's boyfriend was the bartender. Always fun to find out you are knee-deep waxing the PSSY of the woman you are being cheated on with. True test of professionalism right there. Do I tear this PSSY up now? No, he'll do it later. Edit. No freaking way. You all popped my gold cherry and I will now be known for PSSY tearing. I can live with this. Studying abroad in England. I planned a weekend trip to Barcelona with this girl. This is pre-cell phones. I overslept. Got to the airport like 3 hours late. As soon as I arrive, there's the girl. At the exact same time we both say, "I am so sorry." Wait. What are you sorry for? Turns out she overslept too. British Airways changed our tickets for us. No charge. And we got to Barcelona a few hours late. I think the real plot twist is the fact that the airline didn't charge for switching the flights. After searching for years for my birth father, he offered me $3,000 to get lost as he was running for a political office and didn't want the embarrassment of an illegitimate child. was at a big art show with my wife and kid, 3 or 4 at the time. We were walking up to a doorway and I noticed a couple of huge nude statues. I mean, like, no big deal to me. But I was worried about what the kid was going to say because he is a bit of a loudmouth at the best of times and I didn't need him yelling about private parts in the middle of a crowded art gallery. I realized the worst thing to do was make any kind of a scene about it. No covering eyes or anything. Just subtly angling the stroller away from the statues and making a big deal about art things on the opposite side of the aisle. Then, the inevitable happens. I remember it happening in slow motion. Kid's head turns towards the naked statues. Eyes widen. Arm raises and finger points. Mouth slowly opens. Dad, look at those statues. They aren't wearing any socks. A friend of mine. Apparently he was sneaking out for a trip outside the city with his friends since his parents didn't let him go. They were on motorbikes. Already on their way outside of the city, suddenly he got into an accident with another bike. It was his dad he crashed into. I used to work with a guy in his early 20s that at the time of the story was getting ready to go with his family for his first out of the country. He was pretty damn excited and we were getting the play-by-play of all the things, where they were staying, what they were going to do. He was preparing. Specifically, he would need to get a passport. But his birth certificate had been lost. When the replacement one arrived, Mum's name isn't the woman he's called Mom his whole life. It's his sister. Turns out his sister had him super young. His grandparents basically took him on and raised him as their son and no one ever told him the truth. So sister was actually mom and dad was actually grandpa and grandma. Real dad is unknown. He took a few days off work to sort himself out. Still went on the trip. Still apparently had a blast. I was a Starbucks barista before the whole names on cups thing was big, or at least it wasn't really practiced in my tiny store. There was this very cute guy who came in maybe 4-6x a week. A little often. But nothing out of the ordinary. He flirted like mad. He flirted back. It was all great. Then he comes in with his fiancée. I was betrayed and treated him coldly from then on. A month later, 2 of them come in together and I find out that they are twins and I'd shot down any chance I had with the single one. Friends' parents were always so nice and welcoming. House was clean and boring. Pretty normal quiet life, and then they were caught making a large amount of meth and are still in prison now. I knew a woman who was going through divorce proceedings with her husband. He was always argumentative and borderline abusive towards her. Certainly always shouting and demeaning. Then, just as the divorce was entering its final stages, he very suddenly died. His autopsy showed that he had a massive undiagnosed brain tumor which had been physically altering his personality. His wife felt all kinds of guilty afterwards and took it out on everyone she talked to and lost a lot of friends in the process. I got laid off from a company I had worked for over 20 years. I went in for my exit interview and the HR lady said, "Dwayne, from a site 3 states away, wants to hire you." I said, "I'm not moving that far." She said, "You can just work from home." Now where I was working was a 130-mile round trip commute. I got laid off and ended up with a commute that was from my bedroom to my den. Kept doing it for over 4 more years. My grandfather's funeral. He was always a fairly reserved and distant father as far as I understood. Would fit the stereotype of a northern dock worker who comes home expecting dinner to be in the table and then goes to the pub all evening via the bookies. Anyway, unsurprising heart attack later. We're all gathered for his funeral. We're a big but close family, so we know everyone, including his friends. However, one guy turns up. About the same age as my dad and his siblings who nobody knows. Long story short, turns out it was my grandfather's son. From another family. From another marriage. That went on for as long as his marriage to my grandmother. My grandfather had maintained 2 marriages over 40 years. Having 7 children with my grandmother and just the one with this other woman. They knew about our family and kept away, and apparently my grandmother knew about them but kept quiet. Turns out he wasn't going to the pub every night. This is my go-to answer for a lot of questions like this on Reddit, but it still blows my mind to this day. I was adopted from South America to the US when I was a toddler and have no memory of my birth parents. I had an older friend mentor I met in college. I knew him as Mike. When I learned that my birth mother passed away, I got a few of her belongings, including some pictures. Who was in these pictures? Mike. He was my birth father. I work at a prison and a lady flew all the way from Nigeria to visit her brother who was supposed to be incarcerated at my unit. She speaks little English, but we tried to explain to her that the inmate was not in the system anymore. He must have been released. We call a supervisor and it turns out he was released over 5 months before. She walks away confused and come back in with her husband who speaks English much better. We tell him the scenario and he asks, "Well, where did he go?" He doesn't have any friends or family in the US. We told him we don't know where he went. He was released, he could be anywhere. The guy, obviously confused, says, "Well, he couldn't have gone anywhere because he doesn't have any legs." A few years ago I got invited to a friend's engagement party. They were throwing a huge bash because they were planning on a very small destination wedding. Later in the evening, my friend's fiance registered sign takes the mic and starts thanking everyone for being there. "Sorry. Jen will be out to thank you guys in a minute. She's just having a wardrobe malfunction." He goes on to tell the story about how they met, how they were best friends and decided to get engaged, and finished along the lines of, "We wish you could all be there and that we could get married right now. So we're going to." Out walks Jen in her wedding dress. TL. DR. Engagement party turned into a surprise wedding. I used to call my tutor MR. Fortunately her name was Miss Ter. I was getting late to catch a flight and hadn't checked in. Discovered when I reached the airport that I actually came to the wrong airport. Had to travel about 30 minutes to reach the other airport. Went to check in about 20 minutes before my flight. They didn't have any seats, so updated me to business class. Best flight of my life so far. My mom and a gal pal went to Mexico for break during college. They had a great time. While boarding the return flight, her friend says, "Sorry, I'm staying," and runs off. My mom hears from her a few weeks later after not being able to contact her at all. This was the 70s. Long distance calls and phones were scarce. Turns out her friend been sneaking off nights and f***ing the hotel gardener. She loves him and stayed in Mexico. That's all my mom knows. Hopefully they lived happily ever after. Update. I found out the woman's name and believe I have found the correct one on social media. She got married in 1979, which lines up with the story, but she lives in Green Bay, WI now. This girl in my high school class got into a top university for political sciences. Super smart. Friendly. Daughter of one of the most powerful politicians in my country. Her mom was investigated for some illegal money stuff. And turns out her tuition money was coming from that. She had to drop off because they lost most of their money. I am from a South American country. I know the girl did not deserve it. But she was also too proud to apply for student loans. I once had a job interview. It was very early in my career and I was trying to move 500 miles to a new place. I built prototypes and brought samples of my work. It was a 9-hour drive. But everyone seemed so enthusiastic that I figured it was a lock. I did not get the job. I found another job in the area and took it. 6 months later they called and asked me to interview for the job above the one I had applied for. I was given an offer on the spot and worked there almost a decade. In the first few months the people there told me the guy whose job I had, who would have been my boss if he hired me initially, had actually said the samples and work I did was beyond him and he didn't want an employee who knew more than him. Well, I guess he doesn't have that problem since they fired him and replaced him with me. After my dad passed away, my brother did our ancestry line for fun. Come to find out we have a half brother that my father didn't acknowledge. He was married before my mom, which we also didn't know. We started a relationship with him and his family and all was well for a while. Now we realize he is a complete tool who constantly borrows money, cusses everyone out when things don't go his way, threatens suicide just to FCK with our heads, and just makes our life miserable in general. Truly wish I had never met him. My mother's friend was married to a man for many years. They struggled to have kids because he had fertility issues and then later on she developed ovarian cancer and had a hysterectomy. Years later he cheats and leaves her blaming it on them having no children because of the hysterectomy. He and the woman he leaves her for proceed to conceive twins via IVF. Once those twins are born his mistress finds out he doesn't have as much money as she thought so she leaves him and the twins. So I mean at least he got those kids he wanted so badly. My buddy and his girlfriend took a train to London to see a band play. It was a long journey, almost an hour, with a few stops. And once they were one stop away from London they realized they didn't have the concert tickets. They got off the train, checked their bags, searched every pocket, checked their bags again and decided to go back home to look there. They got back and found the tickets on the table in the hall of their house, and headed back out again. When they were arriving at the station for a second time, they had to wait because there was a potential bomb threat. It turned out there was an unattended bag which was being checked over by the bomb squad. Whose bag? My buddy's girlfriend bag. She left it at the station after looking for the tickets. This girl I know was embarrassed of her home so whenever her boyfriend would go pick her up she'd run to a subdivision like 5 minutes away from her house and waiting at the end of the driveway for her boyfriend and when he would drop her off she'd just walk into the backyard of the house and say that she goes in through the back door. Her excuse was that her roommates were nosy so she didn't want him to come in. She did this for almost a year until he knocked on the door of that house unannounced once and an old lady was confused as FCK. One of my high school friends has a very strange brother who likes to pretend he's a girl on online games to get free stuff from people or something like that. After I graduated, I moved to Boston for college. They live in Texas, and last winter I went back to visit my friend and I was hanging out in her house when I saw her brother's laptop in the game room open with pictures of this girl on the desktop. He said they were random pictures he found of some girl who posted on Reddit. They were SFW pics. But her account was inactive for years now so he was using those pics to prove to someone he was a girl in the game he was playing. It blew my mind because that girl went to my school and was in my econ class. Met a guy online. He was cool. Found out he lived less than 2 hours from where I live. We meet up. First time seeing each other's actual faces. F-king doppelgangers. Turns out his father is my bio father's older brother. Both our bio dads bailed before we were born. We both were sexually abused as kids by teachers, him at 15. Me at 13. Both us have soy allergies and lisinouric protein intolerance, it's genetic. And both us joined the army and failed out during BCT due to undiagnosed mental health issues. Our lives had run parallel to each other. He's only a year older than me. When I was a sophomore in high school, we had a rash of thefts occurring during classes. It was a small school and we had no hall monitor or cameras in the halls. It went on for months until the gym teacher happened to catch the kid in the act of stealing from someone's backpack. There was a ruckus out in the halls and my class ran out to see what was going on. The thief was the principal's son. The gym teacher was holding him by his wrist and was telling everyone he just caught him stealing. The kid then pretended to pass out and he just fell to the floor while everyone rolled their eyes and went back to class. He was known for trying to get attention however he could. So cringy. Double plot twist. He pretended to be the thief.